I hope this is the last one. This is getting out of hand. Thanks for joining me in part 2 of the Game Theory Mega Man episode of Debunker Buster. The same disclaimer from part 1 applies here in part 2. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, I recommend going back and watching it now to know where we are moving into part 2. We are about to see MatPat do a complete 180 on his previous theory, and also smear Mega Man's good name into the mud for seemingly no reason. Buckle up, and here we go. If you caught on to the logical inconsistencies of MatPat holding Dr. Light accountable for the direct actions of Dr. Wily, get ready for even more of that, but this time in reverse. I don't know what it is about this guy, but he loves to loosely try and justify things with faulty logic and vague points that don't actually add up. In fact, as we will soon see, he even avoids evidence that would otherwise render his points moot and incorrect. You want to talk about Dr. Light not accepting responsibility for the things that he did? Well, this guy's a pro at it. Moving on to the next video of his, MatPat makes the following claim. Dr. Wily has actually won in the end, and Mega Man doomed humanity. Oh, brother. I've heard this one passed around a lot too. This is another one of those theories that relies on hyperbole and being contrarian. I'm not trying to get ahead of myself, but do you have any idea how long the Mega Man timeline spans? Literally thousands of years. If you somehow believe Wily has any sort of influence on the events that happened even just centuries after his death, you're really grasping at straws here. But let's break it down anyway.
Today we're going old school to talk about a franchise that no one cares about, least of all Capcom themselves. Well, least of all might be an exaggeration. Probably the entity that cares the least about this franchise is the YouTube algorithm. Ain't nobody seeing this video.
This isn't theory related, but please screw off with this comment. I know your videos are primarily based on milking whatever franchise the internet is currently obsessed with, or whatever other popular game fads are around at the time, but there's no reason to be disparaging towards one of the staple video game franchises that make up the backbone of the entire industry. Mega Man is hugely influential on video games, art, pop culture, and of course, many people who are personally attached and deeply connected to the series and its characters. To say that nobody cares about Mega Man is grossly incorrect and disrespectful. I think anybody watching this channel would agree. Which begs the question, if nobody cares about Mega Man, why are you making a video about it? Who is this video for? Who are you appealing to if not the very Mega Man fans you are now insulting to their faces? You couldn't talk about Mega Man without taking a potshot at it? While it's true that for a long time the general feeling from Mega Man fans was that Capcom did not seem to care about the franchise, your video was made in 2020, a full 2 years after Mega Man 11 came out, along with tons of new merchandise, model kits, legacy collections, and re-releases of old art books, as well as the release of Rockman X-Dive, which is essentially a giant love letter to the entire Mega Man franchise, borrowing elements from every series to try and appeal to all fans. Say what you want about gacha games, but the team behind the game itself are well aware of fan favorites and in-jokes, and show that they have been paying attention to the fans who keep this series alive. Not to mention, if you follow any of the reputable Mega Man news sources out there, you'd know that Capcom has announced yet another major Mega Man title that is still currently in development as of the recording of this video, indicating that the franchise is very much not dead. So this sentiment that Capcom doesn't care about Mega Man feels doubly disrespectful after their honest efforts to revitalize the franchise after a long period of silence, and also comes several years too late to be relevant anymore. But as we will see, actually doing any sort of tangible research or attempting to remain current on the Mega Man franchise is an effort that is beneath everybody's favorite game theorist.
No, friends, far from it. Today, it's my goal to convince you that despite being beaten over and over and over and over and over again in this franchise, Wily is the one that ultimately comes out on top. In the Mega Man series, you lose. The bad guy wins, and humanity suffers big time.
So just to reiterate, right here, the claim is that despite constantly being defeated by Mega Man, Dr. Wily has somehow won out in the end, and humanity suffers big time. I want to emphasize this point. He claims that humanity suffers big time because of Dr. Wily. Keep this in mind, because there is a distinct difference between humanity suffering and Dr. Wily being directly responsible for humanity's suffering. For instance, it's one thing for a volcano to explode and destroy a city, But it's another thing entirely for Dr. Wily to intentionally set off that volcano.
Get those busters a charge in. We're about to ruin Mega Man.
The thing you have ruined is video game lore discourse and discussion. You have filled an entire generation of people's heads with logical fallacies, fostered whatever the opposite of critical thinking is, you teach disingenuous argument practices, and worst of all, you spread blatant misinformation about the franchises that people enjoy. You know, I actually made this channel partially in response to your egregious misinformation and lack of integrity in accurately reporting on facts, evidence, and events in the game series that you covered. And worst of all, I think you know you're doing a bad job, and do it on purpose, because people who don't know any better tune in, look at you, and assume that you are some sort of authority on the topics on which you speak. Outrage gets attention, after all. But as we will find out, the only thing you are an expert in is misinforming people. But Twitch, it's just a game. Why does it matter? Because stories matter. Because fiction matters. Because characters and their motivations, struggles, and lore help shape who we are as people, and even our culture. And to twist and turn them into something that they are not distorts people's views on these tales and encourages poor logic and critical thinking in the people who take him at his word, rather than seeing things as they were intended. Personal interpretation is one thing, but these are not interpretations. They are presented as fact with evidence. If he would simply acknowledge that his videos are entertainment and not to be taken seriously, then perhaps I could let this slide. But the fact that every single one of these theories are presented as genuine arguments or well-researched analysis makes my synthetic blood boil. Anyway, let's hopefully get on with this video without any further distractions. I just really needed to get that off my chest.
There's a twist here. As early as the first game of the series, there's something deeper at work. You can actually see Wily learning, growing, evolving in his techniques, creating a massive character arc that spreads through a huge chunk of the Mega Man series. And if you read between the lines throughout the course of Mega Man Classic to Mega Man Legends, you'll soon see that after years and years of defeat, Wily accepts his death as an inevitability. He begins developing ways to keep his conscience alive, and he eventually succeeds in destroying all of humanity. Wily doesn't just win by the end of this series, he dominates.
This is a pretty bold claim, one I hope you have some bold evidence to back it up with.
Wily has actually figured out how to build his own evil robots. In the 1991 Rockman character collection, we're told by Dr. Light, it seems he's somehow managed to complete 8 of his own combat robots, and thus begins a pattern. Wily is constantly losing, but also improving himself based on the events from the previous game.
Wow, he actually cited a source this time. If you have seen the video already, at this point, he is simply claiming that Dr. Wily was defeated, but then learned to create his own robot masters afterwards. So far, this is actually true. Metal Man was developed with Cut Man in mind, Crash Man with Bomb Man, and so on and so forth, using elements from the first 6 robot masters to develop a combat-ready equivalent. I don't think this proves that Dr. Wily was incapable of making robot masters before this point, but at the very least, the part about improving on Light's designs is true for the time being. Future robot masters made by Wily appear to be original designs, however, with little to no ties to Light's established work.
In Mega Man 3, we see in the 3rd castle stage that Wily's progressed to creating his own rudimentary Mega Man clone.
Alright, except that Wily already created Copy Robot, or Copy Mega, who is supposedly a perfect clone of Mega Man. That was in Mega Man 1, proving Wily already had the ability to create a robot master, or at least something resembling one.
These Mega Clones make a nice blueprint for him to build upon, leading us to Mega Man 5 and the introduction of the Dark Man series.
Okay, that's a huge leap. So because Wily was able to copy Mega Man with weaker duplicates of himself, that somehow means that he was able to develop the Darkman robots? I fail to see the connection between Copy Mega and the Darkman series, but maybe he will explain.
Unlike other robot masters who are named based around a certain function, Darkman is the name given to 4 different robots, with only Roman numerals differentiating between them. These guys are particularly interesting as they mimic Dr. Wily's growth in the most literal way. Darkman 1 has tank treads, and represents Dr. Wily's early and inexperienced robot development. Darkman 2 has legs, more complicated on the movement side, and electromagnetic shields, but no buster.
What? Tank treads represent inexperience? How? Tank treads are an actual useful type of locomotion designed for crossing difficult terrain. Not to mention, you point to Darkman 2 as having legs, which then possesses more complex movement. And I suppose Metalman, Airman, Crashman, Heatman, Woodman, Flashman, Bubbleman, and Quickman don't count? Bubbleman can swim, and Quickman is literally capable of running at supersonic speeds. Woodman has his own shield-type weapon, and Heatman can also protect himself in a flame barrier. If Wily designed Darkman 1 with tank treads, it was probably to serve some kind of purpose. Same for Darkman 2 with his shield, and not because it vaguely resembles some imaginary progression of Wily's skills, but let's keep going.
Darkman 3 is all Buster, no shield, and Darkman 4 combines shield and firearms and legs in an effort to mimic Proto Man.
How exactly does a giant Buster represent Wily's technological progression? About the only point you've made here is that Darkman 4 is mimicking Proto Man because that's literally what he was made to do. The story of Mega Man 5 is that Proto Man appears to be behind the latest threat to the world, but it's actually Darkman pretending to be Proto Man with a disguise.
Across the 4 stages of Wily's castle in Mega Man 5, we see the evil doctor's design process becoming more and more sophisticated, from tank treads to one of the hardest fights that you'll encounter in the classic series. Unless, of course, you have Beat the Bird, in which case it's a bit of a cakewalk.
Okay, this is all a very interesting observation, but why? First of all of the traits the Darkman robots have exhibited are traits that previous Robot Masters have already had, proving that Wily has already accomplished these goals. If his plan is to create a group of Robot Masters designed to mimic the traits of Proto Man, and more importantly, stop Mega Man from beating him, why would he seemingly create inferior robots? Why create Darkman 1, who is supposedly inferior, and represents Wily's early stages of Robot Master development, if the goal is to defeat Mega Man? Wouldn't he be sending his best at him? Even if we were to assume that every Darkman robot is actually on par with Mega Man, and has a fair chance at beating him before he even gets to Darkman 4, who is indeed a culmination of the previous 3 Darkman robots, why? Is this some sort of interactive, abstract art exhibit? Who is this show for? Why is Wily making robots which represent his progression in developing robots? What is the point? The only thing the Darkman series of robots shows is Wily's progression towards creating Darkman 4, and not his progression as a roboticist as a whole. And least of all, anything resembling his supposed character arc of technological improvement across the games. Why would he make a series of robots to display his improvement over time, instead of just making robots designed to beat Mega Man?
Dr. Wily, my master, why did you create me with tank treads for legs? Surely if I could have a pair of legs like Quickman did, I would be able to use—
Tut, Darkman number 1. You think I don't know you would be more effective with better legs? When Mega Man sees that Darkman 2 is stronger than you, and Darkman 3 is stronger than 2, and 4 is stronger than 3, Mega Man will tremble with fear, knowing that I have been improving my craft.
But wouldn't he just know that by sending your most powerful creations at him first? Don't we stand a better chance at winning if we don't give him a chance to improve against us?
My genius is beyond your comprehension, Darkman 1. It's about sending a message, not practicality. Now, get out there and be destroyed easily so that Mega Man feels intimidated by the gentle increase in difficulty of your brethren.
Okay.
Furthermore, Wily is the one who gave Proto Man all of his weaponry and his shield. So it's not like Wily is incapable of making a robot of that caliber or anything, since he has clearly already done it by decking out Proto Man with all of his gear. The Darkman robots, in my opinion, are just Wily trying to make a robot as good as or better than Proto Man in conjunction with their Proto Man disguise, to fool people into thinking that Proto Man is behind this game's scheme. But let's keep going. So far, I've yet to see anything that would indicate Wily's growth as a scientist, let alone what this has to do with Mega Man dooming humanity as it says in the title, but maybe it gets better.
Mega Man 7, though, is where we see all of this learning come together as he reveals his version of Mega Man and Rush, the robots, bass, and treble.
call me a pessimist, but I fail to see how the Darkman robots are connected to bass and treble. I suppose you can hand-wave it away and say he's already made weak copies of Mega Man and strong imitations of Proto Man, so here's his attempt at genuinely making his own Mega Man. But that's me doing more work than MatPat already did to justify it at this point. However, I would like to remind everyone that Bass's origin is that Dr. Wily discovered a material known as Bassnium, entirely by accident, which is what makes Bass so strong. So, I would hesitate to attribute Bass's creation with Wily's improvement as a scientist, and more to do with dumb luck and finding a shortcut to power.
Mega Man 7 is also noteworthy because this is where we start to see the Doctor's changing mindset. Up until this point in the series, he's only been focused on creating the strongest robot. But this time is the first time that we see Wily truly create a failsafe in the event that his plans crumble. At the end of 6, Wily is jailed, but expecting this, he programs his lab to boot up and push out 4 robot masters in the event that it's left undisturbed for 6 months. And this becomes a staple from this point forward in the series. Wily has backup plans.
While I will admit that it was smart of Wily to have a backup plan, it doesn't change anything about the fact that there are just 4 more robot masters. I am positive Wily knew he would be captured one day, but this feels like a common sense backup plan and not really an indication that he is getting better at making robots. But okay, your point being made here is that Wily begins to use backup plans in the event things go wrong for him. I assume there will be plenty of examples of this for Mega Man 8, 9, 10, and 11, since you stated that this is a staple of the series going forward, and not a once-in-a-while sort of deal.
Backup plans. He stops building for the now, and he starts building for the future. Now, I'm no doctor, but to me this seems like the kind of shift in behavior from someone that's beginning to realize that they don't have forever to reach their ambitions. Following Mega Man 8...
Must recover all the energy immediately, Mega Man.
Okay, so just to be clear, no backup plan for Mega Man 8. Got it. Wily gets defeated, the evil energy is destroyed, and he escapes as per usual. Moving on.
In this game, we see 2 major events, Bass rebelling against Wily, and Wily brainwashing his own creations, which should be redundant, right? Why brainwash the things that you yourself are creating? But Bass's betrayal in this game shows us exactly why Wily's pursuing this. Wily is learning that robots, to be truly powerful, have to have free will, but that free will comes at a cost, them turning on you. As such, he needs to either A, get robots to willingly follow him, or B, assert his own will in more subtle, underhanded ways.
Wily did mind control King, and King did supposedly rebel against Wily, but the link between free will and literal power has not been established in any way. If free will is all a robot needs in order to be powerful, then any ordinary Reploid should be able to rival X in power. In all likelihood, King may have felt superior to Dr. Wily and rebelled against him. This is not an indication that Wily purposely gave King free will in order to make him stronger. In fact, as I've already established in Part 1, no robot before X has ever had true free will, but we already know MatPat doesn't know this. It is entirely possible that Wily simply did not program in enough failsafes to ensure that King would be loyal to Wily's commands. Perhaps through some sort of logic or reasoning within his own programming, King was able to find a loophole and ignore Wily's orders if they were in service to a higher priority of programming. For example, if King was programmed to take over the world, perhaps he reasoned that he cannot fulfill that programming unless humans are removed from the equation, including Wily. That's just an oversimplified speculation, however. Even Bass takes part in this by frequently trashing Wily's lab anytime he feels Wily deserves it, usually because he feels Wily does not need to make any more robots, since Bass feels that he is already the strongest one Wily will ever create. In this way, Bass's programming may require that he always assert himself as the strongest robot in the world. He will always be the strongest if he just destroys Wily's attempts at making any more robots. Again, just speculation on my part. Because of this, Wily may have placed a device on King after these issues presented themselves that allows him to assert his will on King, hence the brainwashing. Something that may simply disable King's ability to think and replaces it with direct commands from Wily that override his programming. At any rate, my point to all of this is that free will does not automatically mean strength. Every human on the planet has free will, but that doesn't mean that you should be trying to stop freight trains with your hands. Likewise, a robot with free will would not gain a sudden power boost to let them operate far above their specifications.
In Mega Man 9, he targets robots that are slated for termination, and what he tells them isn't unlike the way that he sees the world himself. Quote, "You work hard for humans, and then they destroy you when you're no longer needed. Just because you reach some arbitrary expiration date doesn't mean you should be scrapped." And the robots are convinced. They willingly follow him. The plan doesn't work, of course, but it's interesting because it reflects Wily's mindset at this point. Like we said, he's planning for the future. He knows that he won't be around forever, just like the aging robots. And so his focus is about what's coming next, prolonging his own life.
I failed to see how the Robot Masters in Mega Man 9 have anything to do with Wily prolonging his own life. Yes, you can draw a comparison and say that, just like how Wily wants to extend their lives, he also wants to extend his own life, I suppose, but that's as far as it goes. Succeeding in extending their lives doesn't do anything in regards to actually living longer for Wily. Let's assume Wily succeeds, and the Robot Master expiration date law is repealed, and now Robot Masters can live forever. How exactly does that change anything about keeping himself alive? You could argue that maybe he is in the right headspace, and Wily can see a parallel between the desire to prolong his own life and prolonging Robot Masters, but that's still merely speculation, and there's nothing tangible. One does not necessarily assist the other. Oh, and there's no backup plan here. He just runs away as usual. Kinda strange considering you said that he uses those all the time now, and it's a staple of the series going forward.
Which segues to Mega Man 10 and Wily's most important scheme in all of the classic franchise, the creation of the Robo-Enza virus. At first, symptoms of this virus are pretty much what you'd expect from a robot version of the flu, but after a few months, the infected robots become dangerous, with the following text displayed on screen. The infected robots turn violent and attempt to take over the world. Violence? Okay, that's fine, I would expect that, but take over the world? It's a very specific behavior. There's only one person in all of the Mega Man series so far that's expressed interest in this sort of goal. One, what we see with Robo-Enza is a prototype Wily virus, a way to preserve his life's goal, a way to preserve a piece of himself after he dies.
I actually agree here. The Robo-Enza virus is very likely a prototype of the eventual Maverick virus that will come to pass in a century's time. Wily developed the Maverick virus all the way up to the point of his death, so the idea of Wily making a virus to continue terrorizing the world after he is dead is actually a very valid conclusion to draw. However, I think anyone who knows what the Maverick virus is and who created it already knew this much. And, just to drive the point home, there is no backup plan after his defeat in Mega Man 10. He simply escapes once again.
After he's defeated in Mega Man 11, the latest game in the series and likely the last time that we see these characters alive, he makes the oddly bold claim, "My plans have only just begun." He's got something else in the works.
I would love to know your sources to support the idea that this is the last time we see these characters alive. Who says Mega Man 11 is the last game? On whose authority? What source says this? Every single time people think that a game was the last Mega Man game, a new one eventually came out. Capcom even specifically keeps the endings to most of their games open-ended so that you can squeeze more sequels in, due to the fact they are often told in episodic format, so you do not have to have played any of the other games to understand the story. In fact, Wily even warns them that his plans have only just begun, which, aside from being a cliché thing villains always say, likely means that we can expect another Mega Man game someday. Still no backup plan though, Wily just runs away as usual. Really odd though, because I swore you mentioned that Wily made backup plans a staple feature of the Mega Man games going forward, but here we are, 4 games later, and the only example of a backup plan being used seems to be the first one, way back in Mega Man 7. Funny that.
Well, since the early 90s, it's been theorized that Zero, the super advanced red robot with a laser sword, was a Wily creation. A robot designed to be the perfect Mega Man killer. There was even this incredibly fun fan game named Mega Man Unlimited that bridged the gap in the story, showing Zero as Wily's final and most prized and most violent work, the culmination of all his experiences up to that point.
I'm sorry, did you say theorized? You are actually now presenting a known fact as a theory? Zero is confirmed to be created by Dr. Wily. It is a well-known fact. Of all the times to refer to something as a theory in an ocean of baseless claims, you took a solid, well-established fact and called it a theory? And then, to make matters worse, you are now citing Mega Man Unlimited? Don't get me wrong, the game is amazing, and it's a fantastic way to bridge the gap between the classic and X series, but it's ultimately a non-canon fan game. As such, it has no place in this discussion, because anything you can draw from it is ultimately fanfiction and cannot be used as evidence to prove anything official. So why are you even mentioning it here? Could it be to try and mentally prime your viewers into the idea that this irrelevant piece of media somehow supports your claims? If I made a fan game that states Zero rides a unicycle, how does that help my argument? I'm not really sure why you brought it up in the first place, unless you just wanted to advertise the game to people. That being said, I strongly recommend everyone play this game. It's very good. Moving on.
But how does this help us with the theory? Well, it's simple. Did you catch the peculiar note under the Zero project? Wily dies at the same time Zero is completed, and yet Zero is in stasis when he's discovered almost 100 years later. It's presumed that Zero was sealed off because he was too violent to be controlled, but an all-powerful berserk robot kills their creator and takes a nap for 100 years? It doesn't make sense.
Huh. Actually, a good point, and one that I have used many times to disprove Cataclysm theory. Some people claim Zero went out of control, killed everyone, and then the only logical conclusion is that he took a 100-year-long nap, as MatPat implies, which obviously doesn't make any sense. So, for once, I agree. But let's continue.
Now, you'll notice another branch on this flowchart, Wily's Robot Virus project, the evolution of his Roboenza plan from Mega Man 10. We know from that game that he was infusing elements of himself, his plans for world domination, into early versions of that virus. So we know Wily injecting his will into a virus, and thus infecting robots, isn't all that far-fetched.
Also a good point. While it is obvious that Wily's Roboenza virus was causing robots to do things Wily would generally want them to do, such as take over the world, it cannot be said for certain if this means he is putting his own will or consciousness inside of them, which I believe is what MatPat is implying here.
Injecting his will into a virus, and thus infecting robots, isn't all that far-fetched. And though the chart says Wily died before the virus was completed, remember, this is from very early in the design process for these games. In Mega Man Power Fighters 2, Wily alludes to something much different. With this robot and my other project complete, the world will be mine. It all leads to one conclusion. The virus, quite literally, is Dr. Wily. His consciousness, or his will, or something like that. It's infused into Zero and Zero's stasis pod, waiting to be unleashed onto the world.
A source! A source! My kingdom for a source! Alright. I see the train of logic he is using here, but that line from Power Fighters does absolutely nothing to support the conclusion that Wily is putting his mind into the virus. Wily is referring to Zero and the virus. That much is obvious. The virus is his other project, but nothing in that sentence would support the idea that he is putting his mind into it. Only that a virus is being created, which is something we already know. So far, he is taking the fact that Roboenza causes robots to try to take over the world as his one and only piece of evidence that the Maverick virus he is developing for Zero will somehow include a complete upload of his mind, and then quotes Power Fighters as supporting evidence of this. As I already stated, the only thing Power Fighters does is support that a virus is being made, but has absolutely nothing to do with the nature of what it will do. I'll spare you the video clip, but between these timestamps he basically just explains that Wily has passed from Zero to Sigma because Zero woke up feeling fine and non-violent, but now Sigma has turned evil. While it is true that this is the point at which Zero does seem to become normal and Sigma becomes infected, there is still nothing which claims Wily's mind is inside the virus at this time. In fact, the reason why Zero mellows out in the first place is due to completely different circumstances. Viruses don't just transfer from one person to another and leave the person they originally infected. They spread, meaning if anything, both Zero and Sigma should be evil by now, but they aren't. But, as we will soon see, MatPat is about to try and explain it to us.
I know that the flowchart says that Zero being built to be bad is made good by the evil virus, and so the two negatives equal a positive, but that seems, well, it seems kinda dumb. If that were truly the case, then why would the switch from bad to good in Zero happen with Sigma smashing the crystal on his head, the housing point of the Wily virus?
Oh. Okay. So because MatPat has decided this piece of information is dumb, it means that it doesn't count. Well, that certainly makes things easier for us. I wonder when I will be at whatever level he is on to determine what is or is not canon for a game franchise that nobody cares about. Never mind the actual reason why Zero's personality actually did change and become normal, MatPat is literally taking canon evidence and discarding it, simply because he thinks it's stupid? I'm sorry, but you cannot just ignore literal plot details in a story whenever you want to. Especially not if you yourself have a point you were trying to make. If you can add or remove plot details whenever you want to, you may as well make up anything you want. In that case, this stops being a theory and immediately becomes fanfiction. So, to those of you who care, I will explain what is happening with Zero, and I'll put it like this. Zero has 3 personalities, or so we'll call them. There's Awakened Zero, which is the personality Wily intended for Zero to have, and acting as his ultimate destroyer robot. The second personality is what I will call Normal Zero, as that is the Zero we know from the games, and finally is Broken Zero, which is the violent and out-of-control Zero you see fighting Sigma in the X4 flashback. This personality is the result of a cognitive error in Zero's mind. What this cognitive error is has never been elaborated upon, but my speculation is that it is the conflict between Awakened Zero and the Normal Zero personality fighting for control over the body. Awakened Zero is the version of Zero as intended, the one who follows Wily's orders. However, the Maverick virus had an odd and unintended side effect of flipping Zero's personality into Normal Zero. This is what that developer document MatPat is referencing is trying to say, that Zero was already the baddest robot, aka Awakened Zero, but the virus turned him good, Normal Zero. Furthermore, we know that Wily sealed away Zero because he could not be controlled. That is Broken Zero. Broken Zero is the result of that cognitive error that I believe to be the result of Normal Zero and Awakened Zero being inside the same body. Whenever Broken Zero began to emerge, the virus would give Zero one of those headaches, which attempted to assert Awakened Zero back on top, thus giving Wily control again. But this was not a permanent solution, and Zero was ultimately uncontrollable because he kept reverting back to Broken Zero. Wily needed a robot that he can control 100% of the time, not just some of the time. Wily wasn't going to live long enough to fix this issue, so he just sealed him away. During the fight with Sigma in the past, Zero is punched in the head, shattering his forehead gem during one of these headaches. I speculate that this punch to the head interrupted the Awakened Zero personality from taking control again, and instead suppressed it, thus allowing Normal Zero to take full control for as long as we have known Zero. This is also why in Mega Man X5, when X sees Awakened Zero, he tells X that this is his default state, that he is not a Maverick, and this is just how he normally is. Awakened Zero is referring to the fact that he finally has the intended personality he was originally built with, and Normal Zero is finally suppressed. With that explanation out of the way, let's continue.
And yes, as an aside, I know in Mega Man X5, Sigma alludes to meeting an old man that's likely Wily, but that wouldn't make sense with anything else established elsewhere in the series, and is more likely him either referring to visions of Wily or potentially our next big villain of Dr. Wile.
Wow, he did it again! Something doesn't make sense to you? Throw it out. It's amazing what you can prove when you throw away any and all counter-evidence. In X5, Sigma refers to meeting an old doctor who hates X as much as he does. He is, of course, referring to Dr. Wily. But we know for a fact he isn't just being dramatic. He means he literally met this old doctor, and the reason why we know this is because Serges is actually Dr. Wily in a Reploid body. Or, if you're on the fence about it, Serges is at least definitely connected to Wily in some way. Either MatPat didn't do his research, or he purposely ignored Mega Man X2, where the Japanese script for the game has hints that Serges is actually a Reploid holding the mind and memories of Dr. Wily. In fact, even Hitoshi Adiga of the Mega Man Megamix manga fame confirmed this on his own website, where he wrote short biographies on some of the franchise characters that stated Serges is a Reploid with Wily's memories. Furthermore, in X6, there are even more hints that Wily is in fact Isaac, the Reploid scientist who is assisting Gate. Isaac knows everything about Zero, and even has Wily's same voice. I could go even deeper into why Serges and Isaac are Wily, but that deserves its own video. The point I'm getting at is that Dr. Wily is alive and well, somehow, in the X series. And so to say that it doesn't make any sense for Sigma to mean that he was literally talking to Dr. Wily is disregarding the hard facts that Wily is physically present in the X series through some form, although under a new alias. Also, he mentions that perhaps Sigma was talking to Dr. Weil? What? This makes even less sense. First of all, Weil would have been a child at this point in time, and that's if I'm being extremely generous. Even if we were to assume that Weil was alive during this time, how does that explain Weil's hatred of X? I don't believe it is ever mentioned anywhere that Weil hates X. Weil actually believes that what he was doing was right for the world, and that all Reploids should be controlled rather than have free will. About the only time Weil would have any reason to hate X is when X's plan to use the Mother Elf was accepted over his, but that wouldn't be until the Zero series. So, nowhere anywhere in there is it ever stated that Weil hates X. But you know who does have something against X? Dr. Wily, because he literally dedicated his life, and seemingly his afterlife, to destroying anything related to Dr. Light's work.
From there, the virus comes to be known by many names and evolves throughout the X series, from the Maverick virus, to the Sigma virus, to the Zero virus, but in reality, it was always Wily's virus. For further proof, just look at Sigma's behavior once he gets infected. In X2, Sigma attempts to rebuild Zero, who's good now, to fight against X. He's reprogramming a good robot to join the bad guys.
He's correct in that these are all basically the same thing, though there is no difference between the Maverick and Sigma virus. They are the same thing with different names. However, using building an evil copy of Zero as proof that Wily has infected his mind is really stretching it. But you know who else might have built that copy of Zero? Dr. Wily, who we've already established was present in X2, in the form of Serges. In fact, it is confirmed that Serges is the one who repaired Zero after X1. While it isn't confirmed who made fake Zero, if anyone could build a cheap copy of Zero, it would certainly be the guy who made the original Zero in the first place and then later repaired him. Not to mention, fake Zero is only created as a last-minute trick because you saved the real Zero. Almost as if the X-Hunters were really planning on using the original Zero. For Sigma to have created fake Zero as some sort of imitation of Dr. Wily's will, why was he even bothering with recovering the original?
Dr. Doppler's the main bad guy, only to be revealed later that he was being manipulated by Sigma. It's a direct parallel to Wily's plan with Dr. Cossack in Mega Man 4.
No, it isn't! Dr. Cossack was blackmailed into working for Dr. Wily. Doppler was infected with the Maverick virus, and that allowed him to be controlled by Sigma. Holy crap, this is such a reach!
Sigma, throughout the series, is recycling Wily's old plans, as if he's the same guy playing by the same old playbook.
Sigma is recycling Wily's old plans? How? In what way? Oh, wait, that's it? You used one example? One example that doesn't actually support what you stated? So you mean to say, you have absolutely no further examples of Sigma recycling Wily's old plans? It's almost as if you completely made it up. In X1, Sigma rebels against humanity and takes the majority of the Maverick Hunters with him. I guess that barely resembles any of the times Wily reprogrammed other robots. It most closely resembles Mega Man 9, but that game wasn't even an idea when X1 was developed. In X2, Sigma isn't even a player until the last second because the plot is controlled by the X-Hunters who are baiting X with Zero's parts. What classic Mega Man game is that from? In X3, Dr. Doppler is developing a cure for the Maverick virus only to become infected by it, where Sigma then controls his actions to help his revival. Not sure where Wily ever did that in the past. In X4, Sigma pits Repliforce and the Maverick Hunters against one another. When exactly did Wily ever make Mega Man fight the robot police force? In X5, Sigma infects the entire planet with a virus so that he can crash a space colony onto it. Yeah, that old Wily, always trying to crash his multiple Wily stations into the Earth. Oh, he didn't do that? Huh. Once again, in X6, Sigma isn't even there until the last minutes of the game. So, what exactly is he recycling besides coming back all the time? X7 has him chasing Axel, a next-generation Reploid, who has the power to potentially copy and analyze X and Zero's systems. Weird that a guy who has Wily living in his brain needs a next-gen Reploid to understand Zero, who would be his own creation. The closest thing might have been using Base to steal the Super Adapter blueprints that one time. In X8, the plot is so far removed from anything resembling a Wily plot, I don't even know how to explain how wrong it is. It's almost like this whole concept was pulled right out of his. The majority of his theories, and I hesitate to use that word, so far involved finding two vaguely tangentially related or similar things, and then making up an elaborate backstory for why they are actually directly connected, with no supporting evidence. This is pathetic. Before we go any further, I actually wanted to address something. Earlier in this video, MatPat claims that Wily is inserting his mind into the virus. I breezed past it before for the sake of pacing in the video, but I think it's important to mention that this isn't actually entirely wrong. In fact, there is evidence that Wily's mind may in fact be part of the virus. I know that this flies directly in the face of what I was saying earlier, but I feel it is only fair to present all available evidence. In an interview, Keiji Inafune once made the statement that Dr. Wily was brought back by the virus. Now, if MatPat had simply used this as his source, his entire theory that the Maverick virus actually has Dr. Wily's mind in it would have been given a lot more credibility. But he didn't. So I'm doing the work for him. Now, does this statement prove anything? Not necessarily. Everything else MatPat said is still wrong. Sigma has not been imitating Dr. Wily, nor is there any evidence that this virus contains Wily's mind outside of that single statement made by Inafune, which could easily be interpreted as figurative, such as Wily's legacy is still around due to the virus. Furthermore, Sigma still retains all of his own motivations. Sigma wants to rule the world and believes Reploids are held back by humans. Wily has never shared this sentiment. Yes, both characters want to rule the world, but one is motivated by jealousy and wanting recognition for their genius, while the other wants to rule the world because he believes that Reploids are superior to humans. This still raises the issue of Serges and Isaac. Perhaps they are infected by the virus and therefore have the mind of Dr. Wily, but that doesn't explain Sigma, Doppler, and literally every other person infected by the virus that aren't behaving like Dr. Wily. While I personally believe Serges and Isaac contain the actual mind of Dr. Wily, like how Dr. Light exists in the upgrade capsules, another interpretation is that they simply carry his memories, or may simply be Reploid copies of Dr. Wily and are not the original mind. All in all, MatPat has done nothing to support this theory that Dr. Wily's mind is part of the virus, pointing instead to single one-off examples that are not very strong, which is ironic given that Keiji Inafune himself has made a statement which would seemingly support him, and you all know how much weight I place on developer statements. Nevertheless, I still do not believe Wily's mind is inside of the virus, or at the very least, I do not believe the virus makes Reploids imitate Wily's behavior.
But okay, in this theory I promised to show that Wily wins. How does that happen?
Yes, please do get on with it. We're 11 minutes into your 15-minute video, and you have yet to make a single statement backing your primary claim. Instead, you've taken us on this long and winding ride about Dr. Wily's growth or some nonsense, and have barely proven your initial point, almost as if this is a strategy to distract from how little sense any of it makes. It's hard to argue against your points if people have forgotten what they were. Do I think Wily is smarter and more advanced at the end of the series than he was at the start? Sure, but not for any of the reasons you've provided so far.
Well, from this point forward, Wily, through Sigma and the virus, plunges the world into a constant state of war. Cities are destroyed, space stations fall to Earth, thousands of human and robot lives are lost at the hands of this robot war. Wily, through his final two actions of creating Zero and a robovirus, sends the world into hundreds of years of bloodshed. In order to defeat the virus once and for all, scientists resort to using Zero's body to create a sort of antibody. This Sigma antibody program using Zero results in the creation of what comes to be called the Mother Elf. This elf destroys the virus once and for all and ends the Maverick Wars. Hooray, hurrah! It would seem that Wily's influence has come to an end.
Up to this point, you are correct. Wily, his virus, and Zero are the cause of the majority of the destruction of the planet, up to the point in which the Mother Elf neutralizes the virus and effectively ends Wily's post-mortem revenge on the world. It is important to make a distinction here. From this point on, all actions which could be directly linked back to Wily have ceased. Sigma was the main villain, but he only became the villain because of Wily's virus and Zero. But we are now at a point at which that has been thwarted. There is no more virus. There is no more Sigma. There is no more Wily. This is a major victory for the world. He goes on to describe that the Mother Elf became corrupted by Dr. Weil, which kickstarts the Elf Wars, the prologue to the Zero series.
Another series of wars, the Elf Wars, which is the plot of the Mega Man Zero series. And who's responsible for those Elf Wars? Zero himself.
No! Wrong again! On so many levels! Zero was the one from whom the Mother Elf was developed. Beyond that, the fault of the Elf Wars lies squarely on Dr. Weil's shoulders. Dr. Weil is the one who began to misuse the Mother Elf. Dr. Weil is the one who started the Elf Wars with Omega. Dr. Weil is the one who opposed X's usage of the Mother Elf and decided all Reploids needed to be mind-controlled. Please tell me, where exactly in any of this is it Zero's fault? What actions has he consciously taken to make any of this happen? As I mentioned way earlier in Part 1, when we were talking about how MatPat tried to lay blame on Dr. Light for Wily's misuse of his technology, this is the same flawed logic all over again. You can't even point at Zero and say that he is the would-be inventor of the Mother Elf either, because he had nothing to do with it. He was sleeping. He simply offered his body up to be studied. In fact, Dr. Weil is one of the people who developed it. If anything, it's Dr. Weil's fault for creating something so powerful and then using it for evil. He goes on to blame Zero for several more things, and even claims they are his fault for merely existing. I'm not even going to dignify this with a response. You all already know how wrong and stupid it is. I think I'm going to have a headache, so let's just move on. He goes on to continue blaming Zero for things beyond his control, and claims that this is all because Wily built Zero, ignoring the fact that Dr. Weil, a completely new character that is disconnected from Wily in any way, made their own conscious decision to misuse the technology created from studying Zero. I'm just going to try to skip ahead to a part where he stops doing that and actually tries to make a good point again.
There's also the ZX series mixed in there, where the lines between human and robot get super blurry due to biometals, but that's kind of a side point here.
Mega Man ZX has nothing to do with your argument. If anything, it shows that you are wrong, because the ZX series comprises over 2 centuries of peace and prosperity, as well as Reploid and human equality, the entire plot of which has nothing to do with Dr. Wily, Zero, or the Maverick virus. If 2 centuries of peace is not enough to count as a win for humanity, what the hell does? But this brings up a bigger point I will circle back to address later.
The Master is the only true human remaining.
Beyond him, every other human in existence is either dead or has been fused together with biometal robot parts to create what are known as carbons.
Excuse me? Humans are fused together with biometal robot parts? Can you please explain? Biometals refer to a very specific thing, and you can't just make up a random definition for it. Do you even know what carbons are? What a biometal is? Do you even know where they come from? What they are for?
We eventually watch as the Master dies, meaning that the final, purely human character in this universe is dead. That leads us to the main choice of the game, the one Mega Man is tasked with in the ending of Legends 2. Does Mega Man allow carbons to continue living and leave humanity dead, or does he activate a system that eliminates all carbons so humanity can be reborn once more?
So far, this is accurate. Without getting into the plot of the Legends series, the entire planet is scheduled to have every single carbon alive exterminated and repopulated with pure humans in cloned bodies. The ending of Legends 2 is Rock heading to Elysium to destroy the Elysium genetic library to prevent Sarah from completing this repopulation plan. It should be noted, however, that Rock never destroys the genetic library. He stops Sarah, but the genetic codes of all the pure humans are still stored on Elysium, and what he decides to do with them is never revealed.
Mega Man decides to fulfill his master's wishes and let the carbons live, and with that, humanity is, and remains, completely extinguished.
No, it isn't. Carbons are a type of human. In fact, they are human in every way. They are not the same as pure humans, who have no technological components to them, but they are still humans. In fact, the carbons even think so themselves. During the events of Mega Man Legends 1, when their true nature is revealed, they hardly believe it, believing themselves to just be human. Homo heidelbergensis, Homo rudolfensis, Homo habilis, Homo florensiensis, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, Homo sapiens. All of these are species of human beings. Yes, species of human beings. They are all technically considered humans. One evolved into the other and so on and so forth over thousands of years until we have arrived at the latest iteration of human, known as Homo sapiens. Carbons are not just robots. They are not foreign creatures. They are humans. They are a new kind of human, but they are still humans all the same. A sort of Homo illicerant, or decoy man, as carbons are called decoys in Japan. Or perhaps Homo duplicare is more accurate, duplicate man. It's true that carbons are an evolution of human created from their usage of technology, but so are literally all other species of humans. We evolved literally due to our usage of tools and technology. What would Neanderthals be if not for their usage of tools to better their lives, form societies, and eventually civilization as we know it? Are they no less valid as humans simply because they are an older version of humanity? The very reason we exist now as Homo sapiens is because of our ability to utilize technology. Carbons are merely the next extension of this idea. I would like to emphasize, to say that carbons are only human would be inaccurate, but to say that they are only machines is also wrong. According to Mega Man Legends art director Ishihara-san, carbons are primarily biological beings with mechanical components. According to Legends series lead artist Hideki Ishikawa, to them, surgery and machine repair are the same thing. For MatPat to claim that carbons aren't part of humanity, there would have to be no human element to the carbons, which is simply not the case. For all intents and purposes, carbons are a type of human, no matter the method through which they were created. The game lore even supports this to a degree. In Mega Man Legends 1, you enter the prototype Anthro Unit's living quarters, which are the sub-cities found around Catalox Island. In Japan, the prototype Anthro Units are called Original Hito Units, or People Units if you were to translate it. In Mega Man ZX, the umbrella term for humans and Reploids are called humanoids. In Japan, humanoids are called Hitobito, which simply means people. Which means that since carbons are an evolution of humanoids, this directly links them to the humans from the ZX era. Therefore, carbons are indeed a form of human.
Thanks to the actions of Wily, the human race is extinct. It took him over 3,000 years to do it, but he won. And it was all because the Robot Institute of Technology chose to go with Dr. Light rather than Dr. Wily's proposal. Talk about a butterfly effect, huh?
If only Homo erectus hadn't harnessed fire 1.7 to 2 million years ago, then maybe none of this would have ever happened. Talk about a butterfly effect, huh?
Without this feud between Dr. Light and Dr. Wily in college, none of it would have happened.
Don't forget, Dr. Cossack giving in to Wily's demands instead of finding an alternative solution, the evil robot crash landing on Earth from outer space, all of the Maverick hunters that chose to work for Sigma of their own free will, all of the Mavericks who chose to work for Sigma of their own free will. Dr. Doppler becoming infected by the very virus he was curing and underestimating the danger, Repliforce being too hung up on their honor to be reasonable and starting a war with humanity, Dynamo choosing to work for Sigma to help crash the colony despite knowing it would ruin the planet, Gate being a jealous scientist looking for twisted ways to gain power and prove his worth, the natural progression of technology in next-gen Reploids, Lumine feeling his kind were superior to both humans and old-gen Reploids, Dr. Wilde developing and later abusing the Mother Elf of his own free will, conspirators who agreed with Dr. Wilde's philosophy pulling strings and allowing his plans to come to fruition, the human government not giving enough oversight to the usage of the Mother Elf, the human government sentencing Dr. Wilde to live as an immortal cyborg instead of just killing him so that he can come back later and ruin things, X and Zero both becoming emotionally drained and giving up after centuries of fighting at multiple points in history, the human government making CL develop Copy X and oppressing Reploids to favor humans, the 4 Guardians of Neo Arcadia blindly following orders without once questioning the ethics of those orders, the humans of Neo Arcadia for being prejudiced against Reploids, Serpent for becoming corrupted by a fragment of the W Corps and launching a centuries-long campaign to cement himself as a worldwide corporate entity the world relies on to hide his true evil intentions, the Sage Trinity's Master Albert for setting in motion the game of destiny and creating the Chosen Ones, Master Thomas for wanting to evolve Albert's plans and take them even further, the Elders who created the Elder System as a new form of control over the planet, the Pure Humans for creating and living on Elysium to replace the Elder System, indirectly enslaving all of the Carbons, or Sarah for disobeying the Master's wishes despite being bound by his commands out of jealousy for Mega Man Trigger for being the Master's favorite. You know, I suppose if you just ignore all of these independently chosen courses of action by all of these people, I suppose I could see his point. Everything is the fault of Dr. Wily and Dr. Light's feud if you just disregard all of the things that aren't.
Just goes to show that in the end, despite everything Dr. Light did to keep Wily's evil at bay, it only prolonged the inevitable. Quite frankly, only made things worse.
This makes absolutely no sense. Remember when I said I had a point I was going to circle back to? Here it is. MatPat claims that everything Dr. Light did to try to stop Dr. Wily did not prevent the extinction of mankind. Alright, well, then I must ask you, what would prevent the extinction of mankind? First of all, I already don't subscribe to the notion that mankind is extinct, and I already explained why when I was talking about what carbons are. But I'm left to wonder, just how many times do the good guys have to win before they are given the credit for winning? Every single time evil has reared its ugly head, regardless of whether it is directly linked to Dr. Wily or not, the heroes have won. They've beaten Dr. Wily, King, Sigma, the X-Hunters, Bracana, Gate, Lumine, Copy X, Dr. Wile, Serpent, Albert of the Sage Trinity, Mega Man Juno, and Sarah, just to name a few. All of them have failed in their plans, no matter what they might have been. So how could you honestly look at the entire Mega Man timeline, look at a jealous old man, and honestly say that because bad people thousands of years after his death are trying to do bad things, that Mega Man has failed humanity? Dude, Mega Man was built to sweep floors and be cute. How exactly do you expect Mega Man to stop any and all crime for all eternity? There's multiple periods of time in the Mega Man timeline where nothing was happening. There was just peace and everyone was just doing their thing. But it's called the never-ending battle against all destructive forces because it really is never-ending. A new threat will always arise. A new problem will always be there. If your standard for winning is that there is never any new threat or bad people in the world, then no one will ever win. How exactly did you want Mega Man to solve the crisis on Elysium some 5,000 years after his time? All you can do is look to the victories and count the times when the good guys won. If 200 years of peace, prosperity, and equality in the ZX era don't count, then what does? As I've already illustrated, there were plenty of people who made terrible decisions which reshaped the world as we know it, and none of them had anything to do with Dr. Wily and his rivalry with Dr. Light. Not to mention, when was it ever Dr. Wily's goal to see all of humanity extinct? I already don't consider them to be, but even if I did, when did Dr. Wily ever express an interest in destroying all of mankind? This goal lines up more with Sigma than anyone else, but even if we were to move the goalposts one more time in this argument and try to say, well, actually, Sigma wins in the end, I have to ask you, how? It's 5,000 or more years since Sigma has long since died out. He isn't even a footnote in history anymore from an era long forgotten. Tell me again how humans dying off counts as a victory for him when he is a few thousand years removed to revel in it? It's not as though eradicating the pure humans was a goal of Sigma. The pure humans in Elysium weren't even something he could have possibly thought of because of how far ahead it was in the timeline. The cause of death for the pure humans isn't even explained yet in any of the lore as of this video. For all anyone knows, they died of old age or chose to die on their own, like the Master did, seeing as how hunger, war, sickness, and other struggles of life have been eliminated for those who live on Elysium. So how could Sigma, Wily, or any other villain possibly take credit for them apparently going out on their own terms? This would be like saying that Genghis Khan from 1205 AD actually won against the armies of China because by 2022 AD, all of the soldiers in the armies he fought back then have long since died of old age, meaning he won in the end, actually. This is literally what is being argued when you try to say that because the last pure human has died 5,000 years in the future, that Dr. Wily wins out in the end. In an interesting twist on this argument, one person once argued to me that Sigma actually wins thousands of years in the future because the pure humans live on Elysium, which is a world run and controlled by machines. Too bad they also forgot the small detail that the machines work in service to the humans. How could you look at the mother units, servitor units, and reaverbots, all with the express function of maintaining and preserving the pure humans' lives, and whose job it is to turn on a machine that will clone and revive every single pure human, guaranteeing their race will live on, and say with a straight face that this is the victorious outcome Sigma wanted for his machine brethren all along, working in servitude to the humans, keeping them immortal. If anything, one could argue that Dr. Light has won out in the end instead. Dr. Light's dream was a world where humans and robots can live peacefully together. Not only was this dream accomplished a mere 100 years after his death in the X series, despite numerous post-mortem attempts by Wily and other madmen seeking to disrupt it, but by ZX, we actually do accomplish a perfect society between humans and Reploids, and come to an agreement by which both species are now equal, and are just considered people to one another. Not only this, but civilization lasted for nearly 200 years unopposed until finally another conflict arose, not between Reploids and humans, but rather between those who could use biometals and those who could not, creating a classist division in people. Both humans and Reploids can use biometals, and they work together to stop this heinous plot. Furthermore, carbons are the direct result of combining human biology with Reploid technology, fusing humans and robots together into one species. You can't really get any more harmonious than that. This, as it was in the very beginning, is flawed logic. It's not even cause and effect at this point. There's events in the Mega Man franchise which were not directly caused by anything to do with Dr. Wily, but he is blaming them on Wily anyway in some pathetic attempt to sound deeper and more interesting than he actually is. And hang on a minute, I could have sworn in the last video you told us that it was actually all Dr. Light's fault. If this is the kind of flimsy logic we are using, we can start blaming prehistoric protozoa for the fall of mankind, because if those stupid little single-cell organisms just stayed in their gross pond water instead of evolving onto dry land, none of this would have ever happened. We can blame all of the world's wars and fighting on the first caveman that discovered that you can hit stuff with a rock harder than using your fist alone.
Dr. Wily's plan at the end of Mega Man 11 really was the ticket for a one-way trip to extinction.
What plan? What about using the double gear system has anything to do with anything you've stated in this video? I don't even think you've said the word double gear a single time in this whole thing up to this point. Is it this? That one stupid line where Wily says, "My plans have only just begun"? Is that what you're referring to? That's not a plan! That's a single sentence you cherry-picked out of the ending and then assigned some arbitrary value to, claiming it actually refers to Dr. Wily planting his mind into the Maverick virus, which you have still yet to prove!
And rub it in even more, Mega Man Legends 2 ends with Mega Man stuck in space with no way to get home. So he even succeeds in taking the blue bomber out of the equation. Talk about killing two birds with one stone.
Mega Man and Walnut are not the same person! This is... Wow. This is so wrong. On so many levels. Guys, I need a minute. I didn't anticipate the levels of disingenuous fact-twisting, evidence-ignoring, and general logic-discarding nonsense that was going to be presented in these videos. The general premise of both of these videos rests on the faulty and incorrect logic that you can blame Person A for the actions of Person B just because they used something created by Person A. Do we blame the Wright brothers for every single plane crash? Do we blame Henry Ford for every single car crash? I could keep going, but you've already heard me say all of these things before. This logic makes absolutely no sense, and you'd have to be a special kind of ignorant if you think that it's perfectly valid. And to top it all off, this is the biggest gaping hole in the whole theory. The name of the video is How Mega Man Doomed Humanity. Except nowhere in the video did you ever explain how. You didn't even say, if only Mega Man had just killed Dr. Wily at some point, maybe all of this could have been prevented. At least then, there's a through line from the title of the video to the final point you were trying to make. But it would still be wrong for all of the reasons I already outlined in this video. How can you just ignore the primary claim of your video? You made it the title, for crying out loud. Not to mention, in spite of using the same flawed logic for both of these videos, they actually contradict one another. One video lays blame on Dr. Light, while this one lays blame on Mega Man, or Wily, depending on if you're reading the title or listening to the content of the video. And as I just stated before, there's not even a statement which properly explains why Mega Man would be to blame, almost as if this whole thing is completely made up to sound as outrageous as possible to get people to watch it. Between the flawed logic, imbecilic statements, and absolutely insane reaches made in both of these videos, it should be considered an insult to the viewer for you to call this the smartest show in gaming, when you clearly must be assuming your viewers lack any and all critical thinking skills in order for that to be true. I make no claim to be particularly intelligent. I'm not trying to call myself an authority on anything either, but the one thing I do try to adhere to is facts and evidence, and maintaining my integrity in researching these topics I care so much about. If I come across evidence that disproves my point, I will not ignore it. I will either try to make it fit into my existing hypothesis, or maybe even just plain change my mind. But at the end of the day, I always try to do my due diligence with my research, and I do not discard counter evidence. After watching this video, breaking down all the flaws in this theory, if you can even call it that, I hope you, the viewer, will keep a keen eye open to these unscrupulous tactics and flawed logic going forward, and will develop your own analytical skills. Don't let people dazzle you with fast talking and flashy editing. Especially don't let them say nonsense and pass themselves off as an expert on the things that you love, which they clearly do not respect. Mega Man may just be an unpopular topic according to some arbitrary video algorithm to some people, but it means a whole heck of a lot to me. Stories matter. Characters matter. Lore matters. Don't let people cheapen it for you. Your theories are bunk, and I'm the Debunker Buster. Take it away, computer.
Timeline anomaly stabilized. Mission complete.
Jeez, of all the stupid, nonsensical, insulting, unbelievable... I can't believe... Twitch, you gonna be okay? Don't talk to me! You're just as bad as he is! I'll take that as a compliment. I could learn so much from him. If anybody needs me, I'm gonna be inside my angry dome! Twitch might be upset, but I for one hope MatPat makes a lot more Mega Man videos. See you there. Thank you to our top supporters, Kyle Dunn, Captain Fantastic, Jolt's biggest fan, NT Saud, Elusive Box, Super Terra, Anapan, Andrea Rutledge, Boss, Chimera Wendigo, Ditzy, Dugan, Exelin, Fabian Navarro, His One Nightmare, Isaac Otaku de Carnitas Diaz, Kiki Sylvie, Kurocodile, Mega Spam X, May Saime, Maruna Stellar, Nesguy, Nova Poly Duo, Silby, and Darts.